Good evening, namaste, assalamu alaikum to all of our viewers at home in Guyana and of course in the diaspora. A warm evening indeed it is in Guyana. Guyana's, as we know friends, Guyana's regional and general elections are just 19 days away. And Globespan and its team has been working hard, and let me give credit to Devin Bisoon, Kumar, Nohar Singh, and all the others who are working hard behind the scenes. We have been working to bring you insight from various personnel, respected persons who would have been part of the political campaigns across the country. The political rhetoric is certainly heating up. Friends, there's been some astonishing twists. Observers have noted that the APNO AFC camp have now changed course with embracing marijuana on stage, while the PPP has now changed course, proclaiming a renegotiating of all contracts, for example. So things are certainly happening. There are so many twists happening on a day-by-day basis as the campaign heats up and as we're getting down to D-Day, just 19 days away. On this platform, we have had a number of persons appearing, trying to engage the diaspora, trying to engage the Guyanese conversation with regards to what will excite people to vote. We do know that by and large, a great number of the Guyanese populace, a great number of our electorate, their minds are made up. They know who they are voting for. But the truth is, all the parties have admitted, all those who have come on this program have admitted that the 18-year-old, the new voters, and also those who might have been of age for the last election or two, many of them are undecided. Many of them are looking to vote their conscience, looking to vote on issues rather than race, looking to vote for Guyana rather than history. And that provides the political parties with a wonderful opportunity to change gear from the old politics to new, from the old way of doing things to new. And of course, from rather than rehashing history in many times, instead of that, we planting strategies and planting a light for the future. I must say that some of the parties have been talking about strategies. Some of the parties have been talking about building a new future. And a lot of new parties have come on the block. We have had a number of them on the program here. So the immediate elections heralds chances for a new Guyana, a prosperous one if we allow it to be. Who can do it? Who can excite the new voters, the undecided ones, to vote for them? Here tonight to talk real politics is no other than former President Mr. Donald Ramotar, who has been in politics all his life and who probably has forgotten more about politics than many of the young people would ever know. Sir, former President Mr. Donald Ramotar, welcome to this Globespan program.
Thank you, and good night to all your viewers here in Guyana and in the diaspora.
Thank you, sir. I know that, let me start the ball rolling with some questions with regards to your current participation in politics, if you don't mind. You being a former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, I'm aware that President Granger would have announced recently or made a statement not so long ago that former presidents should stay out of politics and should not get involved in the day-to-day running of things. What's your comment about that?
Well, that's in the hands of the government. If they're doing things good and have the country run it proper, then maybe I wouldn't have to say anything. But when I see all the things that are happening in our country, our economy is going to the dogs. Every single area in production is down at the moment. Our politics is slipping away, going back to the bottom days pretty rapidly. Our institutions, I just wrote an article this last weekend about our institutions are failing us. Our courts, when you look, our courts can't decide whether 33 is more than 32. And all of these things. Well, I will be failing in my duty if I then don't make my voice heard on many of these things that affect masses of people in our country.
Correct. And I must remind viewers that you know, it was no other than Hugh Desmond Hoyt that was extremely active after he lost the presidency. So
Yeah,
active that he led massive protests, right?
more fire and slow fire.
Correct. So presidents being active in politics is nothing new. I mean, I think I think we all know it was past President Jimmy Carter, for example, and the Carter Center that eventually heralded free and fair elections in Guyana.
Yeah, they played a big role. They played an important role. I mean, of course, the free and fair elections came fundamentally because of the struggle of the Guyanese people. But the change of the international situation and the assistance of President Carter that brought this matter to the international attention played a role in helping in that regard.
Right. Let me ask you this. I wouldn't know what position you would have held then, but you were at least a very senior rank within the PPP in 1992 when the PPP was swept into power. After 28 years, you were out of power. And then after 23 years, the PPP would have lost power. But let us spend a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, sir. Compare the pre-1992 PNC, because you mentioned something about going back to the old days. Compare the pre-1992 PNC to the current day government.
I think this government is probably worse, and it's only a matter of time for them to deteriorate. They're deteriorating much faster than the PNC, because in 1964, when Bonham became prime minister, he did not become a dictator immediately. I would say, from my own estimation, I would say probably from 1973, his dictatorship was complete. But these fellows are going in a rapid direction, and some of the things are extremely worrying. They're stamping on our constitution, violating our laws. The corruption has become very, very massive. It's no longer propaganda. When we were in government, there was a lot of talk about corruption, and it was used as a political tool. And when they came to government, they had more than 50 forensic audits. They spent more than $200 million for that, and really found nothing of substance. A lot of the things they're doing now is more making up and more, more trumped up charges and so forth that they're doing. But clearly they didn't find anything of what they were speaking about. But here we have cases where they're renting a house in Albaistan for $12 million a month. The stadium that they built in Durban Park, they can't account for $600 million, and every year they're voting about $500 million every year to maintain something that they built 2 years ago. And so the airport project, instead of us having a new airport, now we have a refurbished airport, and the price is running away. And everybody believes that there's a lot of kickback and corruption involved. There's not a single project that I can think about that they did since they come into government that is not tainted with corruption. Procurement is not going through by laws anymore. The ministers are deciding who to give contracts to, and everything else. Discrimination, racial and political discrimination in the public service is widespread. Thousands of people have been dismissed from the services there.
So, Mr. Ramotar, approximately 5 years ago, I mean, everybody knows that the country voted the APNO AFC into power. And the Ramotar-led administration came to an untimely end, one would say. If you can, in a few words, sir, I'm sure you would have re-examined those years. If you had to relive those years leading up to 2015, what might be some of the things you would have wanted to do differently? What really went wrong in your mind?
First of all, let me make this point to you. I don't think that we lost the election. I think it was stolen from us. And this is another important issue that to show where our country is going. We had an elections petition, and it has not heard us yet. Although Trinidad had elections after us, and they had an election petition that was heard and done away with. Kenya had an election. It was ruled in favor of the opposition that the election was rigged. New election was ordered. That had happened, and up to now, our case cannot be even called up as yet. So I would just dispute the fact that we lost an election. I think the election was stolen in some way from us. But then coming back to your question, maybe I was a little cautious. I was overcautious, and I think largely because of the fact that I had a one-seat minority in the parliament, and because of that, I think I acted very cautiously, and because I was expecting from the very beginning that the APNU AFC would have moved into a confidence motion eventually. I didn't give themselves time to or take a rest and so forth, and then they would come to me. And if you notice, when I was president, I was bringing my budget at the last possible legal date when I could have brought it, because at every single budget from 2012, I was expecting that they were moving to a confidence motion. So, and because of that, I think I acted sometimes a little overcautiously in making some changes and so forth within the administration.
I remember you said just now, and you mentioned that you know, some of the things that you would have acted cautiously and so forth. But I want to, and you mentioned that it was, and I think we need to remind ourselves too that it was a one-seat minority that the PPP had. But there is something that I've asked all the panelists that have appeared on this show, and I will ask you, and you would have been at the top of it, you know, you would have been, your hands would have been directly on it. NCN and Chronicle. I remember when you were president, the combined opposition voted that to be $1 to stifle, and they promised the population that they're going to privatize it. Today, it's really a rag.
Yeah, we had to go to court. I mean, they were delaying our projects complete. It was a replay in a way of what happened in the 1960s, when every single project was being attacked. Even the PPP housing project in the 1960s, in Rumvelt and La Penitence, they were vandalizing the houses. They threatened people not to build a community centers and so forth there. But it's the same thing that was happening here. The Amerindian whole capital budget was cut. A lot of the development.
You might I interject a little bit? You mentioned something interesting that an old person in Guyana was telling me the other day, somebody who's actually living in Rumvelt area. I'm sorry to be taking a walk down history, but it's not often you meet people with the institutional knowledge like you would have. Just in a few words, that entire Rumvelt scheme, South Rumvelt and all those areas, the housing development, when was it built and under what umbrella of governance?
It was between the period of 1957 to 1964 that those places started building up, and it started actually with the PPP plans of 1953. The interim government started to do something, but from 1957 the PPP accelerated that, and the houses there, Janet Jagan, Minister of the Labour, Health and Housing at the time, that built those areas in Lodge, in New Campbellville area, in Rumvelt, in La Penitence. Those are houses that were built by the PPP.
Right. So sorry, let's come back to the Chronicle and the NCN. If you were to be the president, or forget that question, put it this way, what would you advise the next government of Guyana to do with NCN and Chronicle?
Well, I still believe, I mean, maybe I am one of the persons who has been affected by the past quite a bit. And if you know the role of the media in the past in Guyana's situation in the 60s, and the role of the media when the PPP was in government during the last period of time, I think that it is important for the government to have an outlet where their voices and their views could be heard. Now, I think what needed to be done was to maybe more professionalize it. I think sometimes when people are put in charge, they tend to, without necessarily taking direction, they tend to overcompensate and try to lock out some views and so forth. I think it should be like something like the BBC, where the, or to a lesser extent Voice of America, where the editorial commentary is the views of the government, but the rest of the news is done and try to be on a more objective basis.
Okay. No, sir, I think under your watch, Irfan Ali was Minister of Housing, right?
Yeah.
As you know, he has come, he is the presidential candidate of the PPP, and
Uh-huh.
Irfan Ali has come under serious criticisms for many things, including for 17 charges against him. Now, I'm
Mhm.
sure those charges against Irfan Ali would have been based on actions that he might have taken during your tenure as president. So, what's your comment on those 17 charges?
I think it's really harassment. I would say, first of all, it's pure harassment, and it's attacking Irfan Ali completely unfairly. Irfan Ali was part of the cabinet. These were decisions that were made by the cabinet of our country, and all his actions, all the action that he did when he was the minister of housing, these were collective decisions of the cabinet that he implemented. So I think today that they have charged him, I think it's fundamentally because of the central role that he's now playing in the political situation in our country, and not only Irfan, but a whole set of people were harassed, um, including former President Barra Jagdeo, Roger Lunson. People were just taken down to the Soku and question and so on and so forth. So you have to see that not in isolation that only Irfan. This is a strategy of the government in order to attack PPP civic leaders and people who are active and playing a central role in our politics. Anil Nandlal has been charged too. Many of our comrades have been charged and harassed. So Irfan is one of many who is facing that type of harassment.
Right. But what you have said that is elusively clear to me is that the 17 charges that have been levied upon Irfan Ali were not on the man Irfan Ali, but minister who acted at the behest of cabinet.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, that he should not have been charged. The same way that Nandalal should not have been charged. And I would say that all of them, there was no really justification for any one of the charges that has come before, that has come and that many people have been charged for in this time.
Right.
If they're really serious about fighting corruption, then maybe the PPP had put a motion in Parliament that say 10 years, let's go back 10 years, when all the members of Parliament from 10 years ago to now declare their assets locally and overseas. If they lie, compulsory jail sentence. And if you want, you can even have some international impartial people from the UN or something to do any investigation that you have. But they don't want that. They haven't accepted those. That was a motion put in the Parliament by the PPP.
Right.
And all of these things the PPP have been ready to confront. All the charges of corruption, we tried to organize a public debate on it. The PNC did not come; they ran away from it after the first one. The AFC came and they were exposed thoroughly for what they were doing, and I think that is the way we should deal with these things, publicly and openly.
As president, sir, were you in full compliance with the Integrity Commission's requirement for submission?
Yes. I submitted, every year I was submitting my returns.
Okay, because I noticed that would have been something that we have departed from. So in terms of the actions against a person, a minister, for acting at the behest of cabinet, I mean, I'm asking Anil to come on one of the shows or another lawyer to describe some of these things for us, because I noticed somebody just inboxed me actually to remind me that Winston Jordan I think there was some charge levied against Winston Jordan, current finance minister, by the courts, and he instantly received a presidential pardon.
You're quite right about that. That the president intervened because he was in contempt of court, and the court was demanding that he come to court. He refused to go to court, and then they were going to send for an arrest warrant for him, and the president intervened and stopped it, because the same grounds that you were making there, that the point that you were making there is quite correct, that he was acting within the cabinet. Okay. Now, I think that I think his case was different, because his case was, he as a person was really in contempt of court and not turning up to court. But in our case, the fellows that were in charge, they were all acting within the government, within the cabinet, and within the decisions of the cabinet.
Right.
And now
But,
they're being unfairly pressured.
You would have been heading cabinet meetings at some stage, and I know historically, well, at least up to the Irfan Ali's charges, historically, cabinet's decisions, cabinet's minutes, and so forth were basically bounded secret. And so it was not open to interpretation, and also not something that is levied upon by the courts or so. But I guess what will happen with the Irfan Ali case, it is now going to set a precedence that all cabinet decisions can therefore be open for public scrutiny and open for the court scrutiny by the courts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it opens that possibility for the courts to demand to have a look at these things. But those things are available to the government. The government has those things. Those things are. We didn't do like what the PNC did in 1992 when the left government had stockpile of burning of files and so forth. All those things are in the office of the president. They have access to them.
Okay. Now, Bharat Jagdeo took the mantle of General Secretary of the PPP, and he has said that he does not mind playing a very active role in the next government. What are your comments on his desire to be an active player in the next government if the PPP were to win?
I think it's legitimate. I mean, he wants to play an active role. He's the leader of the opposition now. He's been at the forefront of the opposition to the government. He has been in the forefront of the struggle as General Secretary of the party and as leader of the opposition. So I think legitimately he has a right to play an important part in any new government. Plus, apart from that, he's a very capable economist. He has become a very good politician as well. Over the years, he has developed considerably. And but as I think as an applied economist, there's very few that is better than him at this point in time. Right. So I think he has a contribution to make.
Right, and you would endorse his involvement in the next government.
Sure.
What about Donald Ramotar? Are you going to have any role, or do you want any role in the next government?
Put it this way, I mean, I am always available to my party. If they ask me, of course, it depends on what they actually want, because I don't know if I want to have some of the same level of active role that I had in the past. But put it this way, if the party believes that my involvement in some areas of the governmental work is important for the development of the people of the country, I'm ready to play my part.
Okay. Now, the party still is a communist party, isn't it? It's seen as a communist party, but it does not really hold water anymore?
I think you're right to say it's seen. So in some cases, when it's convenient for some people to criticize it, they still call it communist. But there's very little about communism in the programs and so forth of the party. The party see that this country needs private sector involvement towards the development of the economy, and the party has developed the private sector a lot in the 23 years that they have been in government. And that is not something totally new, because although they were describing Cherry Jagan as a communist, the first industrial estate in Guyana, which was Rumbelt Industrial Estate, was built by Cherry Jagan in the 1960s. And no other industrial estate came onto being until he came back to government in 1992, when he started new industrial estates at Eccles and different parts of the country. So it is looking at the stage where our country is at, and I don't think that even in the period of time when they were describing Jagan as this big communist, he still recognized that everybody got a role to play. And it is even more so now that everyone, every class, every group has a role to play in the development of our society.
Correct. And that is well said, because indeed, no more, you know, I mean, no more will the Guyanese population be sitting back because one set is in power or not. I had a guest here last week, Mr. President, and he would have said, you know, he was basically carrying on the Jagan was kept out of government because of his communist and socialist belief. And I had to remind the person, but Burnham was socialist too. So it was a matter of.
Yeah, there was a big difference. I think, in my view, I think Chelly Jagan was the greatest developmentalist that we ever had in this country. When you look at what he achieved in 1957 to 1964, in the context of such terrible hostility, and what plans he had and the plans that were frustrated, I think one of the things we don't talk about is that we were deprived of that vision and of that vigor and role that he brought to Guyana, to transform Guyana. I remember reading an article in 1956, 57, when there was a commission of inquiry here to look at the situation here, and they were saying that the poverty was so horrible that you don't see that poverty in any other part of the Caribbean. And in 1964, in the heights of those riots, they had another commission here, and there's a book written by a professor by the name of Peter Newton, I think. Peter Newton wrote a book. And he said that you don't see poverty in Guyana as you will see in the savannas in Trinidad and you will see in Kingston in Jamaica. And that to show you how far in 7 years, under very difficult and trying circumstances, how much the PPP did to bring our country forward and to make it the most developed country in the Caribbean at the time of 1964 when he left government.
Right. Sir, modern day politics in terms of, let's say, the past 10 years would have seen some very different movement of players. Now, the APNU AFC's top people, Raphael Trotman, for example, would have come out from the PNC and went to co-lead the AFC. But Nagamutu and Ramjatan basically came out from the PPP's womb. You would have babysat many of them. But I'm not going to ask you to comment on them. I think you have said enough about the gentleman. But I know that you have had another very, very good colleague of yours that would have stood next to you throughout the years. You've been a close ally to Ralph Ramkaran. What do you think of Ralph's position now with him forming this party and going at the polls, opposing the PPP, for example?
Well, I'm very disappointed that Ralph has come from his family history in politics is a very rich one. And his father's contribution to the PPP and to our country is phenomenal. I mean, if you just every day people pass at that five-door sluice going up to the airport, that was under his father's watch. Those things were constructed and opened up and so forth when he was Minister of Works. The Barry Bridge, that was some of his father's work. And his father was a very strong and loyal PPP person. So I think Ralph, in a way, is destroying that legacy of this party. And I hate to say, but I think it's purely from more personal position. It's not a question of principles or what have you. I think it's more personal. He felt that he should have been the presidential candidate, and he wasn't the presidential candidate. And I think that was what motivated him.
Okay.
So disappointment in him, because I mean, otherwise I think he was an excellent comrade. He did a lot of assist the party in a lot of important work when we were in the opposition, and even when we were in government. But to go, because I mean, to allow your personal ambition to overtake what is the best thing for the country, I think it's not such a good thing.
But I guess that would be you wearing a PPP hat, right? Because from people not wearing a PPP hat may not necessarily see that as the best thing for the country.
No, I'm not only wearing a PPP hat here. I mean, had the PPP done such horrible things to make people want to despise it, then you will see. But tell me what the PPP has done. I mean, I think all that the PPP has done is expanded people's human rights, expanded democracy, built a strong economy. What is it that the PPP, I mean, of course, people will have personal problems because we are human beings and we will have some of these difficulties. But I would say that people who've come through the PPP, let's say in my era, who were educated in a certain way, who had ideals, who had visions for our country development, I think, at least for me, speaking for me, I cannot see myself putting my personal wishes, and I have issues too, that I would put them in front, put them in such a way that will harm the welfare of the PPP as a political party, when the party is still a vital organism and the only organization that can really save our country and help it to go forward.
Right. Mr. President, we're going to go off on a short commercial break, but when we come back, I would like us to talk about trade unionism.
Okay.
Both from a slight historical perspective, because I remember, I don't know how many viewers would remember that or would know that the umbrella body of the TUC would have been split many years ago, and you have a FITUG and a TUC. And specifically, I would want us to talk about sugar and sugar workers. But let's take a short commercial break. Devin, over to you.
Thinking of securing your home or business? Worried about intruders lurking at your front door? Scared of lifetime achievements going up in smoke? Then contact the professionals at A1 Security Solutions. We supply and install alarms, surveillance, access control, and fire systems throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. Also now available remote monitoring and GPS tracking for all your mobile assets. Our experience in technology over the years makes us capable of executing any job, big or small. Simply pick up the phone and call us on telephone numbers 220-0341 or 628-0551. A1 Security Solutions, supporting all your security needs.
January marks 1 year since Globespan 24x7 embarked on this initiative to offer a platform that brings in all sides, all points of view, and all concerns. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in discussions that are bringing to light issues relating to social, economic, and political matters that have been plaguing our nation. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills, such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The platform also mitigates the brain drain by having speakers that live in Guyana and across the world participate in these discussions. This concept will avail a broader view for the benefit of all Guyanese, so Globespan needs your support to offset the expenses. Kindly contribute by clicking the link in the description to help support these programs.
Thank you, and we are back live with our program. Tonight our special guest is former President Mr. Donald Ramotar, talking to us not just his experience as president, but his continued active participation in the political scene across Guyana. Mr. Ramotar, as former president, you would have been very, very involved in trying to shape the future of sugar. And I think under your watch, the government of Guyana would have thought that there was a viable future for sugar, notwithstanding the high production cost and the low world market price. However, today sugar is totally decimated. Tell us a little bit of sugar, and especially the sugar workers, and then if you can take us back to the umbrella labor, the union itself, and what's happening on that scene in your view as the former president.
First of all, I am very disturbed at what is happening in the sugar industry, largely because the last visit I had abroad as president of Guyana, I went to India, where I had a lot of discussions with Prime Minister Modi in January 2015. And while we were there were several things that we negotiated. We negotiated money to connect the East Bank and the East Coast Highway. This government said they're taking that project. They haven't started it as yet, but that was negotiated by me. I negotiated a new ferry to go from Georgetown to Mabaruma. That the government has agreed to take, but that hasn't started as yet either. I don't know what is keeping them back. I negotiated a center of IT, and that has started. That project this government has taken, and it is at the University of Guyana right now. And I renegotiated soft loans to recapitalize the sugar industry. And this government has not taken it. Instead of they gone to a road in order to destroy the sugar industry. And our plan was, one, to expand the sugar industry, to make it increase production so that we could bring down the average cost of production, one. Secondly, was to turn the industry into a complex and add revenue streams to the industry. That is what the loan was for. And then we would have gotten not only the loans and the thing to recapitalize the industry, but technical assistance as well. So we were going to put down a refinery. We were planning to put down a distillery. We were planning to have another, to make ethanol in the society. We started a cogeneration program at Skeldon. We were planning to put another one at Albion and one at Moore. And instead of dismissing 7,000 workers, the sugar industry could have employed another 7,000 people into the various streams of economy that we were doing. But this government, even though the President Granger, when he came into power, he set up a COI to look into the sugar industry, and they told him that he should not close the industry down. He still went ahead and closed it. And by doing that, he has put a lot of other issues in problem. For instance, when he talk about sugar not making money, it's totally not totally true. One, because who paid Gaisuko for all the D&I work they were doing from Skeldon all the way to Polica? Nobody. The DDL is declaring a lot of profits, billion-dollar profits. Where was the raw material coming from? It was from Gaisuko, and employing a lot of people. And also NIS. NIS now is in serious problem. NIS can run into bankruptcy because of the fact that thousands of workers, 30,000 workers this government has dismissed has caused to lose their job since they came into office. And that is putting a lot of pressure on NIS and so forth. Therefore, I think that and then we were bringing down the cost of sugar too by adding new technology, liquid fertilizer, etc., to bring down the cost of production and make sugar viable. The history of sugar always had crisis and coming back and so on and so forth. In my view, the best years of sugar were still ahead of it when they closed the industry down. So I think it was a vindictive act. It was an act of vindictiveness because of the perception that the sugar industry was PPP's stronghold, and they wanted to try to attack the sugar workers and take revenge on them on a lot of these things. So that is as far as sugar is concerned. As far as the trade union movement is concerned, Guyana doesn't have too much of a proud history of trade unionism, with the exception of GAU and some of the other unions that they fight out. Because if you look at our history, the Guyana had a vibrant trade union congress in the 50s. You remember PPP, when PPP was formed, one of the founders of the PPP was then the General Secretary of the TUC. He was Justin Hubbard. So the PPP came out from the trade union movement as well. Chetty Jagan was in the Forest Workers Union, and then he was in the, Janet Jagan was in the Critchlow's Union, and then she was also helping to form the CCW and so forth. So, and that TUC, this is not spoken about enough. That TUC was, when the constitution of the country was suspended in 1953, that TUC was banned as well in October of 1953. And a new TUC was established to support the British and to fight against the PPP. And in that way, they were fighting against the workers of our country, because the PPP has been a party of the working class. And they found themselves fighting against industrial democracy, like the Labor Relations Bill, which was essentially a bill in case you had dispute within a workplace, of which union to recognize that you hold a poll and the workers decide which union they want. Bonham supported that bill in 1953, but by 1963, when it was reintroduced by Ranjit Chandrasingh, and then Minister of Labour, Health and Housing, he opposed it, and the TUC became an instrument of colonialism to fight against independence of our country. And that same structure remains to this day. And unless the TUC is democratized, it's going to just rot and become more and more irrelevant. That is what is happening. There's no kind of solidarity in the movement because of the lack of democracy within the TUC itself. And that is why the GAU and the other unions in the fight, they are not going back into the TUC because of the undemocratic practices that exist there.
Right. So a couple of things that I think would have come out from what you said. One was that, you know, there is the historical perspective. I had GAU here on this show a couple of weeks ago, and GAU basically insisted that, you know, sugar was viable and that there was mismanagement. What's your comment in terms of the management of Gaisuku? I mean, for 2 decades or more, under the PPP, the sugar was not able to really turn around and be a profit driver as it is. Your point is taken, that if one were to look into the cost of D&I services across the country, then it's a huge savings that Gaisuku could have gained. But over 2 decades, the PPP would not have been able to really turn Gaisuku around, even though GAU has insisted, Mr. Ramotar, that the PPP, under the PPP, the sugar did turn around when they brought in the Booker T contract and so forth.
Mm-hmm. There was, put it this way, the industry faced a big challenge in 2010 when the price of sugar that it was getting from the European Union was cut by 36% in 2010. I think the union keeps talking about the management of the industry, and there are some issues, there's no doubt some issues, but I don't think it was the main issue. The main issue in sugar was outside of the country, was the cut, the 36% cut in the price that it experienced in 2010. And the union too, I think, had some issues too. Just like you can say you can point issues in management, you can probably point to some issues there. But those were not the major issues. The major issues were external to the industry itself, the cut in the price. And it needed, I think, what didn't happen, I think it needed a greater kind of recognition of this problem and a greater need to work together. But even without that, the industry was being turned around. Our plan was, and it was going in that direction. If you look at 2015, Skeldon was the biggest contributor of sugar in Guyana in 2015, and we were going towards the issue that we were seeing. By 2017, our plan that we would have been breaking even, and by 2018 we would have been back in the black. That is the plan that we had. We had done a lot of work, convert the fields at Enmores into mechanical harvesting, converted the fields in Skeldon to mechanical harvesting, and new packaging plants at Enmore, new cogeneration plant at Skeldon, which is still giving electricity all the way to Maikodi right now, and several other things that we were doing. So I think that the accusation that it's management fault is not exactly accurate. Okay. And I think also that they could have been, maybe the failure was that we could have been a greater kind of working together with the union and the management. That didn't really happen. And the relationship was fairly antagonistic when there was a greater need for them coming together and to working together. I mean, for instance, you know, I mean, some of the demands sometimes that the union makes, in my view, are not always reasonable.
Okay, got you. And I must say, I mean, I don't know, I don't think many people know this, but I was probably then the only the only person that could do financial modeling in the country. And I remember being one of the drivers behind doing the financial models for New Skill, and when the concept was first being drawn up and taken to World Bank and so forth. And indeed, at that time, the strategies ahead saw a very profitable turnaround for the sugar company. Mr. Ramotar, the economics of Guyana, currently speaking to rice farmers, speaking to small crop producers, speaking to people across the country, agriculture seems dead. Every concentration, every focus seems to be on oil. But when you look at the greater part of the world, you look at the Singapores and Malaysia, all these places, while they use their natural resources, they also buffered agriculture. And today, agriculture is the double-digit economic driver for them. What's your comment? Because I know your background would have been in fostering agricultural thinking and building an agricultural economy.
No, you're quite right. I think agriculture, Guyana is fundamentally an agricultural country. Agriculture employs the largest amount of people, and it will be employing a large amount of people for the foreseeable future. The question was to transform agriculture in every way, to use more, and that started not with us now. It started with the PPP. If you go back to PPP, established the Guyana School of Agriculture to try to use the most updated technology, science and technology into the industry, and try to attract some of the best minds into the industry, while at the same time, tying it up, making agriculture like the basis, the raw material for industrialization within the country itself. And I think that is the way to go. Look, I was in Canal 2 weeks ago on the election campaign. And I met a farmer friend, a party comrade who I met there a long time, and I asked him, I said, you have a couple of oranges you can give me? My throat is giving out of me. And he said he brought back a bag of oranges and gave me. And I said, I don't need that, I only need a few, man. So he said, look, Chief, it doesn't even pay us to pick the oranges now because there's a glut and the price is so low that we don't even pick it, it's rotting on the tree. So don't worry, it's nothing that I'm giving you here. Just to show you that if you had cheap energy, like a mile of Ford would have brought about, you could use agriculture as a raw material and employ farmers not only at the time of cropping, but throughout the year to processing. So you could have had a very, very vibrant, agriculture could have provided a very vibrant processing sector for our country to employ thousands of high-paying jobs for people and so forth.
Right. Because the fact remains that unlike the rest of the Caribbean, we are probably the only one that has adequate, viable arable lands that can come.
When I was president, our plan was, I was speaking to Ramsamy to let us move rapidly to make coconut a bigger crop of sugar and rice. And that was possible. And to make, we were inviting a Brazilian company to plant soya up into the Bini area, in the Borbis area, so make soya not a big crop. Soya and corn, to make them big crops within the society. There are history in Guyana where we see, when Ghana became independent in 1957, Nestle's got very, very nervous that their supply of cocoa to make chocolates would have been cut off. They came to Guyana with a delegation to try to encourage the production of cocoa. So that's another area that I see that we could have new crops. We were given also to particularly farmers in the interior to plant things that were non-perishable, like ginger, black pepper, those things that they could keep, and they didn't have to be forced to sell it because it would have perished too quickly, and improve their own condition while at the same time processing it. Look at Rupununi right now. Although it's a little bit on a low scale, but some of the best peanut butter you can get comes from the Rupununi. The people themselves making their own peanut butter and selling it to people here. When we were in government, the program of the Ministry of Education was to give children things from the community. They could get a fruit juice, they could get cassava biscuits, and also peanut butter and so forth, something nutritious like that they could eat.
Right. So let me just echo what Krishna Prasad has said, and it is something that former President Mr. Donald Ramotar has brought out, that when you talk about Gaisuku and when you talk about the agricultural sector in Guyana, Gaisuku particularly, you cannot only looking at profitability, you have to value the thousands of lives that depend on the estates. But former president has brought in another dimension, that when you look at, you have to factor in the drainage and irrigation systems, you have to factor in the upkeep of housing facilities across the country, road facilities across the country.
Big contribution, and the molasses from Gaisuku.
Molasses molasses that goes to DDL and that's being exported to. And also, I think over the years, one of the things that came out in the discussion I had was, if one were to look at the billions of dollars that were taken from the sugar industry in form of levy that build Guyana, when it's time to proper back the sugar industry, we basically cut the ground out from under it. Mr. Ramotar, let's talk a little bit about one of the viewers has sent a question to me. Sean Anthony Singh has said that, in hindsight, do you think that the sale of the GT&T shares was a wise thing to do?
I think so. I think when the shares, I think the price that we got for the shares was very, very good price. In fact, I don't think we were getting anything near to that. What we already collected was far more than we were getting from any other bid that we had. So I think I think the question now is what is happening within the telecommunication sector is a whole question of the laws, the deregulation, the creating more competition within the system itself and so forth. So it's not a question that selling the company was a mistake as such, but the regulatory laws that I think that needed to be looked at, that we were working on in a pretty vigorous way when I was in government for a short period of time, to try to get it fixed, but unfortunately we couldn't get it fixed before the elections.
But I tell you something that is striking, and this again is coming from one of the viewers, that the monopoly contract was initially for 25 years, and it's taken us more than 20 years to get the regulations right, to prepare for it, you know.
The agreement that they had, that what was creating the problem, one, that they was a kind of, I think, automatic kind of renewal, and some of the condition that GT&T was not willing easily. I think you know a lot about that yourself. Mm-hmm. They were not willing to easily want to give up some of the concessions that they got from the earlier PNC government. And that is what is still seems to be some of the problems that exist. But if I could go back to the question too, that I would not have had any strong objection in us keeping the GT&T otherwise too, because I believe that the state sector can also or should also be allowed to compete with the private sector, as long as it's not done in an unfair, it's not given an unfair advantage in that sense. That I think maybe we could have kept it and invite other companies to come in at the same time. But right. I think we would have been in a better position today if we had probably kept it then. But it had gone, when we got into the government, it was not an issue that it was already gone out of our, and our task was to make the best of what existed then. And what existed then, I think, selling the shares that we sold, I think the price that we got for it was extremely favorable.
Correct. So one Carlisle Knowns has asked, if you can comment about the money that the EU had given to the government of Guyana, given that it recognized the price cuts in the sales of the price of sugar and stuff like that. What happened to that money?
Actually, it all went into sugar. If you look at the amount of money, in fact, I had the figures. I'm sorry, I didn't anticipate this question, but I had the figures also from Ashley Singh, because I had to meet the European Union at one time for a meeting, and that's same because some of the opposition people, and also I think the union in some way, were making this issue, and I showed them that the government has put into the industry more money than we collected from the EU. So if you look at it from that point of view, then you could say all the money went from the EU into the sugar industry. Although it didn't go in the sense that if we get the money today that we hand it over to the corporation tomorrow. But then you look at the totality of how the money went into the sugar industry. Government put in more money into sugar than they got from the EU.
Mm-hmm. So let me just change hats to another topic. Devina Ramgalam has asked for your comment on shared governance. I know it's a hot topic, but have a go at it.
I have a different view than from many people. I'm speaking here on my own behalf. I'm not speaking here on behalf of the PPP. I believe that what is needed in our country is not this mechanical thing of a sharing government, the two parties take over the government and run it. I think what is needed, the first thing that is needed is respect for our constitution and to have a rules-based country where we run by rules, and our parliament. That is what the PPP was trying to do when we were there. We introduced all of these standing committees and then had a lot of select committees. Those could be used to have the broader involvement of the masses of people, all the political parties and the masses of people. I mean, I sat in the parliament too, and I was there at the Economic Service Committee with the PNC. Sometimes they were chairing it. We had alternating chairpersons and so on it. I think those things can work. Like, for instance, when we set up the Ethnic Relations Commission, it was to take that issue completely out of politics and have an institution where people can go if they feel that they have been discriminated against, that they can go towards. When Shelley Jagan asked Bishop George to share it, Desmond Hoyt created this thing and sabotaged the work of the commission. So I think we need to have respect for our laws and respect for the rule of law, respect for our constitution, and let us function like a normal society where we use our various institutions to broaden consultation and to have everyone in. But this mechanical thing of bringing in two parties just deciding that, okay, let's run the country, the two big parties, you're creating a dictatorship. That happens in Zimbabwe. That's the experience of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe had a similar history to ours.
But let me cut with something. Now, you mentioned that there needs to be respect for the laws, respect for the constitution, and all of that. But sir, you were president of Guyana. If a president decides I am not going to abide by any law or the constitution, where does it leave the people, and what action can we ever take except vote them out?
That is what I'm saying. I mean, this is some of the debate that is going on in the United States now. Is anybody above the law? I don't think so. I mean, I believe that if you're speaking about a democratic institution, a democratic society, no one should be above the law. And when I was in government, I did my best. Let me give you an example. In 2012, I invited the PNC to talk about our budget. At the time when we were going to the budget debate, we made certain concessions to them. In order for them to look good, I agreed, okay, they wanted a little bit increase in the pension, so we did it. And we announced that in Parliament. The next day we wanted to we found that Linden had a discriminatory situation where they had electricity almost free. So we said we wanted to phase in so that everybody in Guyana would pay the same electricity rate. To phase it in. They agreed in the first instance. But in ours, they changed their mind, and that caused the uproar in Linden in 2012. And they backed away from every other agreement that they had. So that's what I'm saying. It's important for us to have rules, base rules and laws and so forth that govern our action, so we can be more predictable. We operating within a certain kind of framework. Even though you're the president and you're probably the #1 office in the country, that you still have to operate within a context of a constitution.
Right.
And that is where I think we have to begin. And only when we start to do that can we be able to solve a lot of the other issues. That's my personal belief. I believe that this mechanical business will not work.
Right.
Correct.
Let me just correct one of our viewers that sent me something to say that the government of Guyana would have renewed the telecoms contract in 2010. Not so. The telecommunication company had an automatic renewal that it had the option to just renew itself in the contract that was signed in 1991. And so the telephone company decided to exercise its option for automatic renewal. That had nothing to do with any government, whoever would have been in power at that time. Mr. Ramotar, let's talk a little bit about oil. I have had a number of persons on this show, persons from across the Caribbean. I've even had former Prime Minister Mahadeo on this show, and a number of persons of oil interest and stuff here. Everyone feels that the oil contracts must be renegotiated. If not just for the revenue base that it proffers, but for the environmental protection and other concerns, disaster preparedness and so forth. Now, I do know that we have a dichotomy. One, the current government seems to be very satisfied with the contract as is. Two, Mahadeo announced that the PPP will look towards renegotiating. What is your position, you having been a signatory to some of these contracts in the past? What is your position in hindsight now?
No, I think there is a case. My personal view, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the PPP here. My personal view is that there is a case for some renegotiation to take place. I think the dilemma that we're caught in is that you want to respect agreements and so forth that have been signed, but this one is so bad, and this one is recognized not only by one party in the country, but there seems to me to be a national consensus. One, and it seems also internationally that everyone is saying that this thing is so bad. I mean that there is need for a level of renegotiation. I also talk about the whole question of the what we get from it. For instance, the fact that all the oil is being refined abroad, which deprives us of a lot of the byproducts of greases and the lubricants and even petroleum jelly we wouldn't be able to get from our oil. To me, that's a tragedy, because in 1958, the PPP government, that was Cherry Jagan and Edward Bihari was then the Minister of Natural Resources. They signed an agreement with the California Oil Company to look for oil. And if they find oil, that a refinery would be put down here. Why, these decades later, we are now finding we are the biggest latest find of oil. The potential is very clearly that we could become a very, very great player in the oil industry, and we don't even negotiate even for a refinery to be here. To me, it's madness.
Right. Well, there has been a lot of concerns, and to remind some of the viewers who would have been with us in the past weeks and those who have not been there, we expressed very grave concerns on this show. I had Dr. Maya Trotz and Annette Arjun, and we spoke to Exxon would have flared at least 3 billion cubic feet of gas by this time from whatever little work they have done there. And imagine what would happen as we continue now, flaring 3 billion, burning it up, 3 billion cubic feet of gas, knowing that in countries like Russia even, they're restricted as to the amount that they could flare. They have to find some innovative ways of pipelining it, of harvesting it to make sure that it can be used. Your comments on this, sir?
Well, the technology that it could be used, how it could be used. I mean, you could liquefy those gas. You could send them, you know, so it's not, I mean, a lot, I agree with a lot of that position, that the gas could be used in many, many ways. Even if you go abroad, you will see vehicles driving on the road using natural gas, right, liquefied natural gas.
But undoubtedly, when you were president, you would have signed off to a number of these documents, exploration and so forth. I think under Janet Jagan's presidency too, exploratory contracts were signed. Didn't the PPP government see it wise and prudent to take international expertise in the drafting of those contracts to safeguard Guyana?
Listen, I mean, you're right. You're right to say that what we were trying to do was attract people here to look for oil. Nobody was coming. Look how long. I mean, one of the things that you have to give credit to people like Duki, who stuck with it in the 1990s. Nobody was coming. ExxonMobil got their permission since when? 1999, but they weren't doing anything until the PPP threatened that if you don't start, we will take back the land from you, and that's when they started to do something. In 2014, up to 2014, Shell walked away. Mm-hmm. They gave up their 50% share that they had in the same Lisa well that Exxon now found for $1. They gave it 50%. They gave up half of that they owned, and they gave it up for $1. So we were trying to attract people here to search for oil, to find oil. These were not production contracts. These were all contracts that were exploratory contracts that we were doing. And I would say that we did a good job in attracting and finally getting some, because we didn't have very many. The rush started to come when May 20th, Exxon announced that they found oil. But before that, their interest was very, very low. I told you months before that Shell walked away from. But therefore, I saw a lot of terrible reporting in the Kaichur News about my case that is going on, because now I sued the staff of the Kaichur News for slander. And they even how they report the case, I think it is very bad. But it's because they're arguing. One of the arguments is that I give some of these companies that they were new companies, that they had no experience. But what I was saying that was not true. If you look at the companies that not the whole truth, put it that way, in the sense that some of these companies, because of laws set up, they had to have a local company here and so on. They were new in that sense, but the people who made up those companies were highly experienced people in the oil and gas production, and they were all linked to strong companies internationally with strong financial backing to do exploration for oil. And therefore, even that you're trying to bring out when you were in the cross-examination, they're not even reporting it properly in the media.
Right. Mr. President, we want to take a short commercial break. When we come back, I want us to touch a little bit on this thing about corruption. Now, I think you would remember well the amount of times you called me too, right? Because I was one that was extremely outspoken against what would have been seen to be corrupt, whatever it would have been described as. But you have stood by your party, and you have stood strong with your ministers. The PPP had a reputation of having been massively corrupted, if I used to quote some of the words out there. I would want you to address that when we return from the commercial break, corruption then and corruption now. Devin, over to you for our commercial break.
Looking for an embroidery service or advertising services? Look no further than Inspire Incorporated. Get your very own personalized items that include rubber stamps, ID cards, mouse pads, diaries, polos, office wear, and so much more. Create your own logo or messages on any substract. It's very quick and efficient. Call Inspire Incorporated today at 222-2042 or visit at 62 Area Q, Turkine, Guyana. Times are changing. There are more airlines operating to Guyana. Travelspan GT offices in Guyana have very low fares. Fares have never been so low from Guyana to New York. Choose from Caribbean Airlines, American Airlines, and others. Call Travelspan GT for low fares and your choice of airlines. From Guyana to New York, fares start from $278. And from Guyana to Toronto, fares start from $354. And from Guyana to Trinidad, fares start from $174. Call Travelspan GT for any destinations. In addition to low fares, Travelspan GT has cruises, hotels, and tour packages to Europe, Dubai, India, Dominican Republic, and many more. Call our Georgetown office at 227-1701 or Rose Hall at 337-4287 or New Amsterdam at 333-6230. TravelSpan also has offices in New York, Trinidad, and Guyana. Again, call 227-1701. Travel plans, call TravelSpan.
Thank you. And we are back live. And let me make one correction. I did say that former President Mr. Ramotar, when he was, there was a lot of attacks on his government about corruption and behavioral attitudes of various ministers. And I did say to him just now that he stood by his ministers through thick and thin. I must say that no, there were instances where he removed ministers from office because of whatever internal investigations or whatever perception. So they did take action against some of the ministers. Mr. Ramotar, let's talk a little bit about your, your government and what happened with corruption, and also compare then to now.
As I mentioned to you at the earlier part of this program, a lot of the attack on the PVP government on corruption was more political, much more political, and without any real substance, without any real evidence of corruption. You've got to take into consideration what credit is not given enough to the PVP for bringing certain clarity into position. One, when the PVP got into the government, there was no Auditor General's report. The PVP brought out the Auditor General's report. Never mind, even if it was critical of this government, it ensured that the Auditor General's report came out. Secondly, there was absolutely no bidding when before the PVP came into the office. It was the PVP that introduced the bidding system. Thirdly, the PVP was the only government in the cabinet up to when I was there. I don't know if things have changed now in the whole Caribbean, where the cabinet was not awarding contracts, where the cabinet was only giving a no objection. And that was important. I'll tell you why, because the same East Coast Highway that is being built now, that they went out on a selective tender. And when they came to cabinet, they were given the contract to a company with $10 million more than the lowest bidder. And I remember chairing that meeting and saying, how come you went on a selective tender and now you're going to give the contract to a company that is 10 million more? And I sent it back to them to tell me why, give me a proper explanation of why it is that you're giving a company on a selective tender $10 million more. And that's when they reversed their decision and give it to the other company. So we were the only cabinet that was not awarding contracts in the whole region. We created a lot of these bodies to have a free and open type of system. What happened in our country, there was a massive attack on the PVP because of the political, I think because of the people's memory of the old PNC government, the corruption that existed then, and they were able successfully, I would say, able to transfer that and paint the PVP with the same brush. And that is something we still have to fight to clear up, because this government, I believe, has vindicated us more than anyone else. Because since they came to government, they've had 50 forensic audits, and they found nothing of real substance that they can talk about. Nothing of real substance. Now they're looking at certain violation of this procedure, of that procedure, and they're persecuting people like we talked about Irfan Ali earlier, we talked about Anil Nandalal. Yesterday, the finance minister, the finance man at the Rice Board was sentenced to jail for 3 years. No money was missing. Absolutely no money was missing, and this guy was sentenced for 3 years. They said that some money wasn't recorded in some ledger or the other. So I would say that they by themselves, because they're using these things as political persecution, and as we come up to the election, they're going to try to rig it up more and more. But there's really no substance in many of the attacks that they have against us.
And I just received an interesting inbox message from one Ramotar who says that not asking for your comment, but you may want to comment, who says that the players in Transparency International Guyana under the PPP government are now part of the current government.
Yes, you have that. That's there too. And another thing too, a lot of these things they talk about perceived corruption. perceived corruption. But when you come to the real corruption within the society, I think the PVP civic government was probably the least corrupt government in the whole Caribbean. But I would concede that from the point of view of being perceived as being corrupt, that it was high because of the mass media, the alliance between some of the private media and the PNC, the political opposition at the time, that created an atmosphere to say that everything was corrupt. Even if a road was built for walking and people ran a big vehicle and break it up, the next day they would go with a photograph to show this road was built 5 days ago, look at how it's breaking up and so forth. And to make that look like corruption within the society itself. Even when you went to bid for pharmaceuticals and you were bidding for the whole batch of things, you might find some company bidding lower for one thing or another. Those discrepancies were taken totally out of context to say that the PVP civic government was giving its friends contract and all of that. Totally. I think we were the victims of a massive campaign, more of a destabilizing type of campaign. A campaign reminiscent of what happened to us in the 60s, reminiscent of what happened in Chile, and reminiscent of what happened in many other governments where the media played a big role in destabilizing the government.
Right. Now, we are running into our time zone in terms of our timelines for this program, but there are a couple other things that I would like to have your comment on. One is that Joseph Thomas would have asked for your comment on God rest his soul, that former minister who is now passed on, but that whole aspect to do with the crime spree and government's reaction to the crime spree and the perception of a minister being involved in spy equipment or so. I don't know if you would want to comment on any of those things.
Well, I would comment generally on that period. That period was a very difficult period because the crime in the country was actually politically motivated. It started when you had the 5 escapees from the Georgetown prison, and they were politically given political protection by the PNC to be in Buxton. They allowed those people to abuse the people of Buxton, rape a lot of women, burn down people's houses who didn't want them and who were opposed to what they were doing in the area. The Chester family, many other families, many people were killed in there. The fellow from the gas station who was murdered because they didn't like the criminals in there. But they were kept there with the protection of the PNC. Desmond Hoyt himself went there and spoke at a meeting with criminals all around him and said, keep the pressure up until the government falls. So you had, these were political type of crimes. You had this criminal Douglas on one of the friendly TV station for the opposition saying that he was a freedom fighter with a big AK-47 in his hand and so on. And look at what they did, the rampage that they did all over the country. So it was not an easy period, and it was not an easy period because look at the conversation with Felix and Basil Williams that came out. There were several things about that, and the journalists in this country never asked the question. The first thing that came out of it is that what was implicit there in my mind in that conversation, Felix said to Basil Williams that he see Corbyn left the country when these things were happening. What does that suggest? What does that imply? He was implying there that there was foreknowledge that this thing would have happened at East Bank of the Demerara when 8 people were slaughtered there. The other thing he said, Basil Williams thanks Felix for turning the thing away from the PNC. And he thanked him, and Felix said yes, he saw and he turned it away, but he can't cover up for much longer because the facts are coming out. This was a conversation that was recorded with Felix and Basil Williams that was made public. That thing should be listened to again, and I don't understand how our journalist community did not investigate what was being said. That was a total admission of the PNC's total involvement in a criminal enterprise to use it for political gains in our society. Right. As far as the other people are concerned, I had I was General Secretary of the PPP, and I could tell you authoritatively that the PPP had nothing at all to do with any gangs or any portion. The PPP did not send anybody to fight anybody in that gang. We worked with the police force. The police, we cooperated with them. We didn't stifle them. The operations were all police operations. Whatever arrangement they made, they were all police operations to try to bring the situation under control.
Right. Well, thank you for that clarity. We want to go on a next commercial break, and when we get back, let's come now to what's happening on the campaign trail. Devin, commercial break, please.
After one time is another time. Now Guyana has choices. Choose between American Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, or JetBlue with non-stop and direct flights to Guyana. Check out these low fares. From New York to Guyana, fares start from $209 one-way, $462 round-trip. From Miami to Guyana, from $205 one-way, $448 round-trip. From Orlando to Guyana, from $271 one-way, $591 round-trip. From Atlanta to Guyana, from $271 one-way, $591 round-trip. From Houston to Guyana, from $372 one-way and $751 round-trip. From Toronto to Guyana, $272 one-way and $486 round-trip. These are non-stop and direct flights with all taxes included. Call Travelspan and choose your airline with low fares. Call Travelspan now. In USA, call 718-845-0437. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. That's USA, call 718-845-0437. And in Canada, call 647-557-6200. Or book online at travelspan.com. Travelspan, serving the community for over 26 years.
Thank you, and we are back live with former President Mr. Donald Ramotar having an interesting discussion that looked at everything from monopoly contracts to oil contracts to the campaign to the crime spree. We have literally discussed almost everything that there could have been to discuss. So we want to now get back to the current campaign trail, the current elections trail. Mr. Ramotar, you are currently campaigning, actively campaigning for the PPP. You have been appearing at a number of public meetings and rallies. Is it because you just cannot take yourself out of the political hustings, or is it because you have been at it for a lifetime, or is it because of genuine wanting to be there or wanting to see something?
No, I want to see the PPP back in office because I believe very strongly that only the PPP has shown that it has the vision and it has the drive. That the PPP is probably the only party whose primary purpose is to see that Guyana develops and attains its potential. This group that is in government now, this group is what I would describe as being a bureaucratic capitalist class. This group uses its position in the government to enrich itself. Now look, one minister was living opposite Bakewell before they got into the government. So I suppose it was probably a renting house there. Now they have mansions in less than 5 years. One minister had a divorce before 2015 and said that he couldn't eat, that he didn't have much money to eat. He had to go to receptions, at cocktail receptions to get something to eat. Now he has mansions. So, and the wealth that these people have accumulated in this short period of time shows that their primary purpose is not to help the development of Guyana, but their primary purpose is to enrich themselves. If perchance there is some development, well, that is by the way, but it's not the main purpose. The PPP, on the other hand, their main purpose has always been to develop Guyana in every sense, fix its infrastructure, help its economy, try to build a real economy in the productive sector, build on our education program. We built more than 1,000, maybe about 1,500 schools in the 23 years that we've been in power. We built new hospitals in every single region, every nook and cranny. We wiped out malaria when we came into government. Malaria was killing untold amount of people. We got rid of those things in the society, and our people in the interior have now been able to aspire. First time we have lawyers and engineers and technicians and doctors from our native Amerindian community, giving them an opportunity, equal opportunity, like everybody else within the society. So therefore, I genuinely believe that the PPP is the only party with the program, with the drive, and with the desire to try to make Guyana realize its full potential and to develop our country for it to move forward. And that is why I am going to any meeting that the party has asked me to. I'm not asking to go to meetings, but I am going wherever the party sends me to address any gathering. I'm going to meet them, because if there's a role that I can play, if there's a contribution that I can make, I'm ready to make it, and for the good of this country.
Gotcha. I want to mention one word to you, and I want to hear what's your response. GCOM.
I'm worried about GCOM. I think GCOM was developing very good in the past, and it was gaining a lot of confidence. It was becoming more and more professional, and it was doing its job. I think from 2011, after the 2011 elections, I think that things began to change somewhat in GCOM. If you remember, immediately after the 2011 election, the PNC made a big attack against Suraj Bali and Buru and wanted to get rid of them. They used to go in front of these people's houses in the nights and harass them and all type of things. And then suddenly, then a little bit later on, the attack was on Buru alone. Suraj Bali was not attacked anymore. And eventually Suraj Bali voted with the PNC to get rid of Buru from the Elections Commission. I believe that the 2015 election, I mentioned it to you just now, I believe it was rigged inside of GCOM, because you remember that I know for a fact that when there was pressure on Lowenfield to announce the elections, at a meeting of the Elections Commission, he said, "My conscience don't allow me to announce these elections." And when he was asked why, he said he found fictitious statements of poll. And the commission told him that he should announce the ballots that he is comfortable with and put aside the boxes that he is not comfortable with. Lowenfield put aside 400 boxes. 400 boxes. Yet, nothing changed. And the next day, he announced those elections with the kind of pressure that was put on him. His house was being surrounded in the night by PNC thugs. His family was probably being threatened. And he broke, it seems to me, that he broke. And he is sliding since then. And look again, too, after the no confidence motion was passed, the first reaction of the Elections Commission is that elections can be held in 3 months.
Yes,
and then the Elections Commission position began to change with the position of the PNC. Therefore, I'm worried, and I think it needs all eyes. And I think that the elections, we were back in the 1992 period, where to get free and fair elections, we have to have maximum alertness and every single eye in GCOM under total scrutiny for us to have free and fair elections in this country.
Thank you for that. Now, final question for you, Mr. Ramotar, former president of Guyana. Will the PPPC win?
My own view, it's going to be an easy victory for the PPP because one, if you compare the record of the PPP and the PNC, it's like comparing cheese and chalk. The PPP created and brought the, I mean, look at the record of the PPP. According to Carl Greenidge, from a signed affidavit that he has, that in 1992, the foreign debt was 925% of our GDP. PPP brought it down to about 30% when we left government, 30 to 40% when we left government. The paying back of our debts, Greenidge said so in his affidavit, was 100%, 153% of export revenues, which means that we had reached a state where we were borrowing to pay debts. When we left government, it was 5% of our revenues. Look Our infrastructure was totally destroyed. We had the lowest passes at the examination in the Caribbean. We now have the highest passes in the Caribbean. So much so that the PNC is campaigning on that as one of their achievements. We built in every single area we had an increase in production and productivity. We had a problem in sugar, as we talked about, and that was being recovered. In 2014, it was reaching target, and in 2015, we were on the grounds of reaching targets. Therefore, what is the record of the PNC? They run our economy down. There's not a single area of production that is going up. None. They probably make more money in gold with less production because of the price. But rice is down, sugar is down, livestock is down, bauxite is down, everything is down, gold is down. So if you go on the record, I think it's very, very clear that the PPP will win this election running away. We will probably go back to the period where we had 36 seats in the National Assembly.
And your prediction of a win is with a total majority?
Absolute majority. Okay. I don't think the other political parties are going to make a major impact now. I think in the future, yes. I think in the future, Guyana is destined for weak government. But I think that the PR system that the British introduced in 1964 is designed to create weak governments. The reason it hasn't so far is that elections were not free and fair from 1968, and therefore you didn't have the multitude of parties. But look now what is happening. Now that you have free and fair elections from 1992, every year you've been having more and more political parties. So I think there's going to come a time when you will have weak governments in this country, and that is why it is very important for the PPP to really take to protect its to answer some of these attacks on them about corruption, because that will be an important thing to preserve its integrity as a party of honesty. The cloak that Chelly Jagan put over all of us, and that generation, not only Chelly Jagan, but that generation of PPP leaders, who were many, including your father, that was there. I think we need to preserve that. That is, to my mind, our greatest asset. And we have to fight to build that back so that the party will always be seen as an upright party, a party of honesty, people of honesty and integrity, and people who will run the public life with clear, full integrity and openness within the society. That is very important for the PPP, and that is why the opposition knows that. That is why there is this massive attack about corruption on the party, and we should fight back more vigorously, in my view, to protect what we have earned from hard work in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Ramotar. Thank you, Mr. President, for being here tonight. To our viewers out there, we have had a wonderful chat with former President, Mr. Donald Ramotar. We have basically addressed every facet of the community of Guyanese politics that we could have. We would want to invite Mr. Ramotar again for a future program, maybe post-election, to do an analysis of the results. Let me remind viewers that we're hoping next week Monday to have maybe Mr. David Hines on this program, and we have invited Mr. Anil Nandalal to be on the program to discuss specifically the accusations of that 400 or 500 persons that the current government has been espousing as being persons killed under the PP government. Mr. Nandalal has indicated that he could handle that and he wants to handle it. So those are two upcoming events, the shows that we're going to have. But for today, we have addressed a lot of things, including Mr. Ramotar's endorsement of the current leadership of the party and its vision going forward. And he has not only endorsed it, but he has announced openly that he is backing it at the rallies and at the political parties. Sir, I certainly hope that you continue to play a role in active politics. Certainly the youngsters I know look up to a lot of the leadership that you can offer them. Thank you for being here, Mr. Ramotar. It's been a pleasure to have you on our program, and I certainly hope we can do so again.
Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to engage again with you in the future.
All right. Thank you. Viewers, have a good night. Thanks to Globespan, to Devin Bisoon, to Nohar Singh, Kumar, and all the others who have made tonight's program a success. Once again, have a wonderful night. And to everyone out there, remember what I've closed every session with. Please vote, but do not hate. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. Good night, everyone.